Welcome, NutritionRadio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery, a university nutrition professor of over 20 years and podcast host of long-running shows like Iron Radio. Come on in. Lecture time. Hey, everybody. In today's classroom lecture clip, I've chosen something from a Consumer Protection Red Flags lecture. This is something where we went through from a sports nutrition perspective and looked at some magazines at some of the advertising ploys that try to get you to buy a product. Something to keep in mind is always that you're looking for safety and efficacy. Always come back, no matter how attractive of a web they weave. Is it safe? Is it effective, right? So here's a 10-minute clip about red flags. They're not guarantees that something is fraudulent or that it's from a con man, but they are things that should make you raise an eyebrow. This is just the critical thinking part. We're not going to quite get to the part where at the end we talk about agencies that you can reach out to if you feel like you've been burned or scammed or one of your clients maybe. But feel free to leave a comment on YouTube. You can find us at Lawnman07 on YouTube. And please also consider subscribing on iTunes. Thanks, and at the end of this talk, we'll just close out, and we'll see you next time.
And what we're going to do is we're going to cover a few things about consumer issues in sports nutrition, and then we're going to look at some examples from muscle magazines and see if we can't identify what might be pseudoscience or even fraud. So the first slide says, do you know what the data says? Do you rely on peer-reviewed data? One of the things I'll have you do in this class occasionally is go to PubMed. You can just Google PubMed to find it. Type in keywords and find me recent abstracts, study summaries, on what do we know on different topics. Like I'm going to ask you about fat loading when we get to the fat chapter. Believe it or not, some people fat load. They don't just carb load. Anyway, so do you rely on peer-reviewed data? Most people don't. And then actually, grad students, or as you get more advanced, do you even accept published conclusions blindly, or do you critique the study design? The further you go into grad school, you'll even start critiquing abstracts or full manuscripts of studies. I've seen some pretty poor studies that, got into journals. But for our purposes at the undergraduate level, we're going to believe, for the most part, we're going to accept the conclusions of the peer-reviewed data. And then finally, do you understand the information pitfalls that you and your clients might fall prey to? And that's what mostly we're going to talk about today. So popular information sources on the next slide is where most people get their info, right? The mass media, television, internet, newspapers, books, magazines, radio. The problem for me with that is you'll often get science journalists, sharing that information, and they'll say new research proves, and research doesn't prove anything. It just supports or refutes a hypothesis. And then what I think is boring about the way that journalists sometimes talk about it is they'll jump right to the end, right to the conclusion, and tell you what the study meant. Well, I don't want them making that, conclusion for me. I want some information on the methods. Who did you look at, in this study? Was this all 80-year-old men? That might not apply to me. Or was it athletes? Well, we know that athletes are very different from the cell level on up. What kind of equipment did they use? How long did they feed them this or that nutrient? So the methods is the juicy stuff, and they never give you that on the news. But also word of mouth, and you've heard people talk about that kind of thing before. My sister lost all this weight on this or that diet. Sometimes it's telemarketing or mass mailings where people will notice vitamin ads or that kind of thing, or even government programs. These are generally better. But it's not the same thing as going to straight science. Okay, so consumer education overview. This part of the presentation, we're going to cover, one, the definition of health fraud, the importance of protecting yourself or your clients, because there's a lot of responsibility on you as an exercise physiologist. People are going to ask you questions about different diets and supplements. Tools that charlatans use, or how do you know someone's a snake oil salesman? They're a con man. What are the tools they use? We're going to look at these, and then we're going to put it to work. How to spot quackery, as I said. And then what you can do if your client is victimized. I think you might be interested in that. Like, if somebody buys a product that doesn't work or even caused a side effect, what do you do? Well, there are some things you can do. Okay, so what is health fraud? And I apologize, everybody. I have allergies kicking here, and I'm going to be sniffling. Health fraud. It's a multi-billion, with a B, dollar per year business. I used to put specific numbers in there, but it went up every year. So multi-billion. And here's the key, and this is what I might ask you. The sale of unproven ideas or products using advertising ploys rather than facts. Using advertising ploys rather than facts. And that's what I'm going to show you how they do it. The truth is, you should always be looking for two things, and you should be telling your clients, there's two things we want to look at when we're considering buying this, getting on this diet or buying this supplement. Safety and effectiveness. That's it. Safety and efficacy. I want to see data. Show me the beef. Show me the data on safety and efficacy. All this other stuff can be gobbledygook. So why learn about this stuff? Here's key. There is no local, state, or national government agency that screens advertisements before they are printed. Let me say that again. There's no agency, not local or state or government, that will screen an ad before it's printed. I think about that commercial on TV that I've seen recently. The girl saying, I saw it on the internet, and if it's on the internet, it must be true. Well, most people aren't that naive, of course. But when they look at an ad in a paper magazine or that sort of thing, or maybe on the internet, advertisements are so pervasive now, nobody's screening that to make sure it's true. The next bullet is a big star, and I'm going to ask you this on the test. The DSHEA, the Dietary Supplement Health Education Act. DSHEA is a law that's basically it's very liberal in allowing product availability to the public. So we have a lot of dietary supplements available for sale here in the States that they won't have in Europe or even Canada. So that's DSHEA, D-S-H-E-A. It's very liberal. Well, because there's so much on the market, you could see how that increases our responsibility to know about it. We're university educated, and we're going to have clients asking us, well, I heard creatine's a steroid, and all kinds of nonsense. And that's a lot of responsibility, so we have to stay up on this stuff because of DSHEA. So what are the tools used to con athletes? One is the secret, ancient, foreign, or proprietary red flag here. So if you could think about this, what's bad about a formula or a diet or a supplement being secret or ancient or foreign or proprietary? All of those things remove it from easy testing and analysis, right? Oh, that's proprietary. I can't tell you. Or this is an ancient formula, or it's foreign. It removes it from scrutiny. Well, that's not how science works. I want to scrutinize it and see if it's safe and effective. Another one on this slide, unrelated visuals. Now, I know it's not nutrition, but cigarettes are classic examples of this, and you will see this in sports supplements as well. Unrelated visuals. People playing volleyball and water skiing while they're, for a cigarette ad. Well, that's got nothing to do with it. Those cigarettes have nothing to do with volleyball. So the advertisers want to link emotion. Sometimes I'll see phone company commercials and, a student's off at university and calling home. And, there's this big emotional tie. And, they're not telling you how many dropped calls you get per week or that kind of thing. Unrelated visuals. Next, this is my favorite or, most hated, if you will, baffling use of medical ease and scientific terminology. They will purposely use a lot of big words in order to sound impressive, but leave people going, I don't know what that is. It sounds really good. And that's the problem with that. So medical terminology, scientific terminology, those are the sorts of things you get exposed to at the university, and you could read your way through it and realize, that's not that impressive. Another one on the slide is selective citations. They'll pick the one or two studies, often that the company sponsored, to quote unquote prove it works, and they'll ignore all the studies that are to the contrary. I remember when I was an undergraduate, growth hormone boosters came out, 2 amino acids, arginine and ornithine. we're supposed to boost growth hormone. Well, that's attractive to a lot of athletes. That's both a lipolytic or fat-burning kind of hormone, and it's an anabolic hormone for muscle tissue. And there was a paper called, I still remember, it's the Isidori paper. It was an Italian paper, and it showed that if you fed people enough arginine and ornithine, they got this big growth hormone surge, and all of the companies fell over each other, putting this little reference in their advertisements, and other labs couldn't replicate that data. So it was a big problem. It was a selective citation, and we're looking for a consensus in the literature. So many studies all saying the same thing. For example, creatine has a greater consensus than even a lot of drugs do. Creatine monohydrate has a 75% consensus that it helps with repeat explosive performance. So you're looking for consensus, not selected citations. In other words, cherry picking. The next slide. More tools. Natural. Natural does not mean good, and synthetic does not mean bad. This was such a problem, the FDA had to issue a press release a couple of years ago to specifically try to educate the public. And you'll see that all the time. Oh, it's natural. Well, let me give you an example. I always laugh about this, but poison ivy, right? Natural. Would you have a poison ivy salad? No, you wouldn't. So, I don't know. Years after the class is done and, you're done hearing me ramble on, maybe you'll remember the poison ivy salad to prove that natural does not equal safe. Barely legal is another. And when I talk to a lot of dietitians, they don't even understand this. They'll roll their eyes or kind of squint at you like, why would that be attractive? Well, in sports, I think we realize that suggests potency. It's still a tool used to con athletes, but, barely legal, almost like it's an anabolic steroid or something that's going to be, so potent. And then I just put some pictures on here, sharks, natural, yes, but safe? No. So you get the idea.
The NutritionRadio.org podcast is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, check with your physician, nutritionist, or qualified exercise physiologist in order to make the progress that you need.